Get in there. Okay, there we go. Phone bracket secure. What's up, guys? Welcome to the first phone fall Astro episode. We haven't done a phone episode in a while. I haven't done an Astro episode in a while. The summer was full of monsoons. So interesting things have been happening in the Samsung world, and I don't know how many people know about it, and I don't even really know about it. But basically, I've got my S22 Ultra here. And I found out recently that in the Expert Raw app, which is a separate app from the regular Pro Mode app that you have to download in the Samsung app, so start with that. Within that Expert Raw Mode app, Samsung has added an Astro mode, and I think it's akin to like the night mode and the pixel type astrophotography mode, but I think it's going to be on steroids. I don't know anything about this. I haven't tried it. I haven't researched it. I just saw that it was there. So I want to photograph Orion because that's kind of the only cool thing that's up in the sky right now that's recognizable. So let's just jump right into it and see what happens. I have no idea what's going to happen with this, and I want to bring you guys along with me and see what this is all about. I do have some plans for this though, so let me get my screen recording going here. Okay, so we are in my home screen. We're going to open up this Raw app. So that's the camera Raw. So welcome to the Pro Mode Expert Raw app. This is very similar to the Pro Mode. I have lots of tutorials on the Pro modes on how to use that. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you can go check those out in my playlists. They're the same pretty much for all the recent Samsung phones. So anyways, we are in the Pro Mode app. So now check this out. Up here in this top left hand corner, you'll see this little constellation looking thing. That's our jam. This is what we want. So the next thing you'll notice on here is we have duration, and it starts at 4 minutes. So there's some things that we should talk about. And then if we slide it, we can slide it to a 7 minute. That's kind of random. And then, oh shit, where did it go? Oh, there it is. And then we can slide it to a 10 minute. So it has a maximum of 10-minute exposure. Now, what I'm going to tell you right now is that this is not a single 10-minute exposure. This is going to be akin to the night mode, where it's going to take a bunch of pictures probably and then blend them together. So normally when I do my Astro stuff, if you guys are new here, I play with all kinds of cameras, and I do Astro stuff with like telescopes and big cameras and stuff like that. Normally when you do stuff like that, you take it to the computer and you use programs to stack the images to reduce the noise and get cleaner images. Well, I think this is going to do all of that in camera, in the phone. So this is likely going to take a bunch of images, and this is where, like in the night mode, you don't have a choice. Like it tells you, hold your phone steady for X amount of seconds, and you do that, and it takes a bunch of images and it blends them together for you, and it kicks out the image. But in this Pro mode, we have the option to not do anything, apparently. So all of that talking was just wasted because what you'll notice right now is that this stuff is grayed out. So I'm trying to select these and I can't. So the only thing that I can select is my exposure compensation, which I don't want to do that because that messes with your ISO. So I'm gonna back out of that. I'm gonna go ahead and, you know what? I'm just going to start it in autofocus because surprisingly this, does an okay job. I can see Orion in the frame right there. So I wanted something cool for like a, a foreground or something like that, but we're not even going to worry about that. We're just going to take this shot and we're going to see what happens. I'm going to take a 4-minute one. And we're just gonna see what happens. So it's taking the picture. Hold your phone steady. Okay, that did it. So let's see first shot. So it's giving us some information. Speed 20 seconds, 6.4 millimeters, ISO 1600, f1.8, 24 megapixels. So you can see Orion there right in the middle, and then you can see up this star, the bright orange star in the top left. That's Mars, actually. So and then this bright orange star in the middle of the screen, that's Betelgeuse. And then Orion the Hunter is right there in the middle. So I am going to take these back into the computer, into the studio, and see. So now let's go. I'm going to get out of this mode, and I'm just going to take a regular shot, and I'm going to set everything. So I'm going to drop the ISO to 800 on here, and I'm going to drop the shutter speed to 20 seconds. We'll go with 30. So 30 is going to give me a little bit of a motion blur, but I don't think you're going to see it too much. So I'm going to take just a regular, this is what you would do like regular. So if you guys have seen my how to photograph the Milky Way videos with the S22 or the S21 or any of the ones that I've done, I'm using Pro mode, or in some cases Expert RAW mode. The only difference there is going to be the 12-bit versus the 14-bit RAW file. But this is just how you would do it for regular. So we're taking that shot, and this is a regular 30-second ISO 800 shot. So it's thinking, it's computing. This is probably doing the JPEG. Yeah, so that's the JPEG. So we'll have something to compare them to. This is going to be interesting. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try. I'm going to go back into my star mode, and I'm going to go for this 10-minute shot. So we'll see what that looks like. All right, so here's the raw file. You can see up in the right corner. This one says raw, and then here's the JPEG that it did for the compressed file. So you'll notice right here, almost dead center, that little bright blobby bit is the Orion Nebula, actually. And I can't zoom in anymore on the back of the screen, but that's the Orion Nebula, and you're picking up the nebulosity there. That's pretty cool. But you'll see this is the regular 30-second shot, and you'll see a lot more banding and a lot more blobbiness and artifactiness. So this actually is looking a lot cleaner in the sky. I don't really care about that bottom half the field there, but let's go into the telephoto lens now and kick it up a notch. So the hard part is now we can't see what we're doing as well, because the longer your focal length is, the harder it is to see the stars and what you're doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go out of this, and I'm going to go take a regular shot, like a sub 30-second shot, and I'm just going to get my exposure. So I'm going to go ahead and crank up my ISO to 3200, and I'm going to do my shutter speed at 15 seconds. So this is just purely so I can gauge composition. Oh, now I can see it. I need to go up a little bit. But now as you're taking the shot, you see there's Orion's belt. There's Betelgeuse to the left. There's his sword to the bottom. So if we click on that, just out of curiosity. So that, wow, that looks so horrible. That blobby business right there in the hand and the sword bit is the nebula. Okay, so that's a good gauge, right? That was ISO 3200, 15 second. So now let's go into the star mode, and now I know that I need to go up just a tad so I can get that framed right. There we go. So now I'm going to go 10 minutes again, and I'm just going to see what happens. All right, it just finished. So we're getting some weird chroma stuff, some color shift. So looky here, and you can see there is Orion's Nebula. All right, so let's look though. I mean, you might be inclined to think this is like dog poo, and I would agree compared to my real cameras, but compared to that, this is where we came from, okay? So this is what we traditionally would have been able to do at this focal length, and we went to that. That's workable. I'm gonna try to clean this up. So let's, I'm gonna go ahead and call it tonight because it's like 17 degrees right now, and that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. This is like cold, especially for southwest New Mexico. Let's go jump back into the studio where we have heaters and hot chai, and I'm gonna try to edit a couple of these shots and just kind of see what an edited version will look like. So we'll see you back in there in the studio where it's warm and chai time, and we'll talk about this stuff, and we'll talk about some future plans. Okay, hot chai, phone, check. All right, so it's the next morning. We've got all the images on the computer. We've got plenty of hot tea. We've got a nice warm studio. Let's jump in there. I just want to take a look at a couple of these, and I'm probably going to only edit one or two, and I just want to see what they look like when they're edited. So let's jump into it. So right off the bat, you'll notice like the settings here, 20 seconds, ISO 1600. Obviously, this was not a 20-second, this was a 4-minute exposure. So what I'm thinking it did was that it took a bunch of shots and then blended them in, and that's maybe their each single shot's settings. You'll also notice here the wonky color versus the JPEG. So I think this is probably Adobe having a really hard time reading the DNG. So Adobe sometimes has trouble reading certain RAW files, but we can get this back to some sort of a normal state here. A little before and after, so nothing major, you know, you just saw a little bit of cleaning up there. And we'll go ahead and open this in Photoshop. All right, so if we look here, so you will see a little bit of this blurring, especially right in this region, and that's going to have to do with the fact that this wasn't on a tracker and that it's trying to blend those shots over the 10-minute periods. But considering that, this did a pretty good job. We're having the streaky bits there, and again, that's what you're seeing is, I think, the blending issues. But you'll notice that the landscape, the foreground, looks really good and actually quite sharp there. And I think there's maybe a little bit of blurring right there. So I think what this is doing is it took the landscape and it maybe either did one shot of it or it blended those separate. I don't know how it's blending, but it's doing a pretty good job, all things considered. So here's the JPEG that came straight out of the phone that it edited in the phone, and then here's my JPEG from that really wonky purple raw file that you saw. And I think, all things considered, this is pretty good. I don't want to push this too hard, but actually what I want to do is I'm just going to do like an Orton effect and clean up the sky and then give it a little bit of a artistic edge. And this is not necessary, by the way, nor is this sponsored or plugged of anything. This is just something that I'm using and something that I want to try. So we're just going to go in here and I'm just going to mess with a few things real quick. Alright, so I really didn't want to do too much to that, you know, just clean it up a little bit. I don't like to push these types of images too hard, especially on the smaller sensors like the phone, so I think we're just going to leave it at that and call it good. I do want to take a look at one of these shots though. So you can see here's that green JPEG. This was with the super telephoto, so this was basically a 70mm full frame equivalent. And I just want to see if we can clean this up a bit. So just a little before and after of some color balancing and general slight tweaking there. So here you can see the in-phone JPEG rendering and then my editing from that wonky raw file. And they obviously brighten theirs up a bit more, which then is increasing the noise and you're getting this color artifacting there. So it's really important to know when and how far to push your images. But this is looking a lot cleaner, and there is some nebulosity right there. That's Orion's nebula. Of course, you know, to an untrained eye or someone unfamiliar with astrophotography, it just looks like a blobby star. And there's a bunch of more cool stuff in here, the flame nebula and the horse head. But this is 70mm, so that's pretty cool to see. So we can compare that to like a shot like this that I did on also, I think on my R6 and 70-200 f4. And this was on a tracker, and it's hazy because there was some high altitude haze. But you can definitely see Orion a lot better, the nebula. And then right here you can even see the flame nebula and the horsehead nebula, which is pretty cool. So obviously the phone is not going to, and then look at that, that's the witch head nebula. That's what I was after, getting that witch head nebula in there. That's not easy. Anyways, this is the phone shot that we have of that, and I think that if we're not comparing it to multi-$1,000 camera setups like the one we just looked at, that this is looking pretty good. And this is already like leaps and bounds better. So where was it? This was the single shot. And you can just see the ridiculousness of this single shot. And there's obviously some wonkiness going on here, but you know, going from that to this is just absolutely incredible. So this is a 10-minute exposure that I shot after I turned the camera off, the recording camera. So this definitely has some problems with some blending, and it's not looking to me as good as this 4-second shot. So here's the 4-second and here's the 10-second. So I think right off the bat with just the phone and the tripod and nothing else, that the 4-minute did a better job. All right, so I think that's all I'm going to edit. I do think that with a star tracker and some little extra helpings, that you could probably get a lot more out of this, especially with those 10-minute long exposures. Having them tracked is going to greatly reduce the amount of computation that the phone is going to have to do, especially when it comes to blending, since the Earth is rotating. So I'm not going to make any promises, but I do want to try that at some point. I don't know when, but I definitely want to get this phone on a tracker and mess with both the telephoto and the super telephoto. So the telephoto, the 3x, this image here that we just edited, is, like I said, is an equivalent of a 70mm full frame. But the super telephoto, the 10x optical zoom on the S22 Ultra, is equivalent to like a 240 or 260, somewhere between 200 and 300 millimeters. And that is going to put us into a very interesting wide field astro potential with a tracker, but it's going to take a lot of extra effort to get the exposures, and the autofocus definitely is going to be a challenge. The autofocus actually works well, surprisingly, in the new Pro modes with the wider shots, and it worked up to the 3x because I didn't put it in manual focus for that 3x shot. But using the super telephoto, it's just, the autofocus just isn't going to work. There's not going to be anything for it to grab onto. So that's definitely going to require some tweaking with the manual focusing, which on these phones is kind of a pain. But I think the biggest takeaway here, the one that I'm most excited about, is that, you know, obviously this isn't going to replace real cameras, astro cameras, modded cameras, trackers, fancy lenses, all telescopes, all of that stuff. It's not going to replace any of that, but what it is going to do, and what I personally love so much about technology, is that it's going to allow people who have never been able to get into this before, or never even been able to see or capture anything like this, it's going to allow them to do that. So that is a huge step up, and that's like a huge gateway drug for photography, for me especially. I love seeing people come onto my channel and start following me because I'm doing the phone stuff, and then getting into the phones, and then hitting those phone limits, and then working their way up into more advanced photography and all of that. It's just so cool to see people's creativity being opened up like that. And this phone, moving forward, these kind of things are just a huge starting point for that, and I'm really excited about it. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap it up here. It's definitely second breakfast time. We are out of chai. So if you have any questions about anything that I did or didn't do concerning, you know, the expert raw stuff and this new Astro mode or the editing or whatever, just leave those in the comments below and I will definitely answer them. If you're still here from this super long video, I really appreciate it. Hit that like button for me, because that's the best thing you can do for the channel. But if you're really into my content and want some even more out of it, then check out the channel memberships down below, with a lot of extra stuff going on down there. And that's it for the plugs. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.